A man joining me now is no stranger to war, 27-year military veteran, Navy SEAL Master Chief, co-creator of the U.S. Navy Warrior Toughness Program, and author of a brand new book, Life on the X, a Navy SEAL's Guide to Meeting Any Challenge with Courage, Confidence, and Readiness. Stephen Drum, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Good morning, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. When's your book coming out?
So pre-sales are up right now. Pre-orders are up right now. Anywhere online books are sold, and that's for the print and for the ebook. And the audiobook will come out a little bit later. The book officially launches on March 7th.
Nice. Steve, first off, what's your take on how this war is playing out? The experts have said, the war colleges reveal, this looks more like World War I.
Yeah, I would say, and a lot of people right now are questioning, okay, well, how much do we want to continue pouring into this? But I always look at this in terms of how the world is watching our response to this as it relates especially to China. They're watching, they're testing us. So I think that we obviously have to have a measured response in terms of escalation, but we wholeheartedly, there can be no question on our resolve to support the Ukrainian people.
So you could see the bigger picture that if Ukraine falls quickly, there goes Moldova, there goes Georgia, look out Poland.
Yeah, and then it's easy. It's easy to kind of go down that route. Well, now we're looking at serious conflict that we had not seen in 60-some years.
And we're not playing a role. We're providing the weapons, which far outstrip Russia. Do we overestimate Russia's quality?
I think to a degree, yes. I think, we look back at like their technology in terms of their hypersonic missiles. And I always go back to one of the things that U.S. military does that other nations, even our allies, often can't do to the same degree is our combined arms combat power. It's one thing to have certain individual soldiering skills. It's one thing to have technology, but how do you integrate all of it? How do you integrate all of it so anywhere from your supply to your reconstitution of forces after casualties on the battlefield? It's the big picture. It's coordination of that effort, and I think the U.S. does that, and I think we're seeing that right now, that Russia is not capable when it comes to that full spectrum combat operation.
What did you get out of joining the military all those years ago?
I was just an 18-year-old kid, and I really knew that I wanted to do something. I always wanted to serve in an elite unit, and I was like, I won't make this a career. But once I got in, and once I found myself in SEAL training, I realized, hey, I'm surrounded by some of the best people that I've ever met. This is my home. This is where I want to spend, the rest of my young adult life. And from that, I really learned a lot of things on really how to show up in moments, really how we plan, prepare, and execute in the SEAL teams. It really translates to all the other areas in my life as well. And so I really took a lot of that, just being deliberate and intentional with how you show up to important moments.
Did you join to become a SEAL?
I did. I joined to become a SEAL at 18, right out of high school. And unfortunately, I always make this joke. I wasn't the smartest kid, because I failed to qualify for SEAL training by a couple of points. But then I was also dumb enough to believe the recruiter when he told me, they'll just waiver those couple of points. So worked submarines for a couple of years and then went out to SEAL training in 1995.
And then when was your journey like? Where did you end up being deployed? What are some of the missions you're comfortable talking about?
Yeah, so first off, I joined, I showed up my first SEAL team in 1996, SEAL Team 2 on the East Coast, and we did several deployments, did some deployments to Europe, to the Middle East, a little bit in Africa, things like that. Some kind of real-world operations, but nothing crazy. And then my first Iraq deployment was 2004. That's when I first got my real taste of what combat was like. I showed up there, and we were doing mobile security details for the interim Iraqi government. And I found myself going out on sniper operations. And from there, a couple more deployments to Iraq, Afghanistan, back to Europe. So kind of all over the place. But it was a great journey.
How much more did you learn in combat as compared to in training?
Well, I think you always wonder, everybody wonders, how am I actually going to show up when the bullets are flying? And that's the big thing. And I think what was really revealing to me, and this was an aha moment for me, is the first time I'm in combat, taking heavy fire, grenades being thrown at me. And as I was in that moment, I started actually having flashbacks to the training, to the urban warfare training we would do before we went overseas. And I realized just how important the proper level of training is. And it was effective. I'd never been in that situation, but the training made it feel as if I had because of the realism. And I had confidence from that, even through the fear.
Right. And I mean, that builds into your book, right? The discipline, the willingness to work at it, to prepare for the time before it happens, some of the things you can apply to everyday life. So when it comes to war, you're not alone. You have to learn to work as a team. Is that why it's so legendary tough to get through SEAL training?
It is, right? And there's always the adage, they always say, hey, anybody can make it through, like, still training. But what they're really looking for, and this kind of culminates in Hell Week, many people have heard that, right? Hell Week is where, for the uninitiated, it's a 5-day, almost fun fest right now, consisting of almost no sleep, constant physical activity, and frequent immersion in that cold water. And it tests two things. It tests your level of commitment. How do you have the mental fortitude to push well past when your body says no? And two, how well will you collaborate with your teammates? Will you put your own pain, your discomfort, your misery, you put that aside and support your teammates and support the mission? And if you can do that, if you can grind it out, then you make it to a SEAL team where you're further evaluated and further tested.
Were you worried, and are you still concerned about the vaccine mandate and what happened to the SEALs and how they had to go to court to keep from being expelled?
I can't probably speak too much on that, honestly. I mean, personally, I would say this, and a probably unpopular decision within the teams, but it's like, hey, you got to, at a certain point, if this is what there's needed for mission readiness, I don't necessarily, I believe in the freedom of choice, but at the same time, it's like, hey, this is what we need. We need you to be combat effective, and that's the decision they made. Now, can they clean it up right now? Can they revise that? Probably. But, at a certain point, sometimes you just got to get in the boat and row, even though, it's not what we want to hear, and that's what we want to do because it's about mission readiness.
What about life on the X? What does that mean?
So X, the term X, it's a military doctrine term, but you can think of it almost like X marks the spot. So when you fast rope out of a helicopter onto that rooftop of that building you're assaulting, we refer to that as landing on the X. And we also use it as for example, patrolling down the street, the enemy ambushes us, has us in that kill zone. We're on the X there too. In that case, we got to get off the X. But that X is that most dangerous, most difficult part of a combat operation. And it applies to our own lives, professionally, personally, where opportunities converge with some of the stress that we feel. And we really need to be deliberate and intentional with setting the table for our success so we show up big and bring our A game to those most important moments.
And how does that translate for people listening right now who will never get close to the level of fitness and discipline that you've displayed through your 27-year career as a Navy SEAL?
Well, it's for the average person, myself included. Like nobody's shooting at me. It's not life or death right now. But I think for all of us, you have jobs, careers, reputations, relationships, those things that are on the line. We often feel that pressure, and it's all relative, right? And some of the biggest stress that I've felt has been outside of combat. Whether I'm worried about showing up being unprepared or looking stupid, that creates an amount of stress that I think we all can relate to. But if we use some of the skills that elite athletes, special operations forces, we use some of the skills that they use to be prepared and execute at a high level, then I think we're all going to be better served in terms of showing up better and bigger professionally as well as in our personal lives and our relationships.
And by the way, I've seen Stephen Drum speak, and he's very motivating, relatable to your elite status, relates to the everyday person. I know I got a lot from what you're saying, and I'm looking forward to the book coming out. I got some of the material before, but it'll be out in a week. We hope to have you on TV and radio. But Steve, just looking at your life and the transition, we understand it's extremely tough, especially for people that do things as significant as you. A lot of times when they make the transition to the civilian world, it's extremely tough. Did you have a tough one?
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, I did. I launched the speaking business literally about 2 months before COVID hit. So I found myself in that situation where I couldn't contribute. I couldn't do the thing that I love. I was just kind of found myself in that kind of moment of self-pity. And I had to realize, even though I can't go out there and maybe speak to an audience, I have a greater purpose, right? What is it exactly that is important to me? Do some character search and say, okay, well, at the end of the day, I can still push out a message that I think the world needs to hear. And I think for all veterans doing that transition, find out less so about the specifics of how you want to execute something, but what do you stand for? Kind of align your values, your beliefs, create a personal mission statement, and try to make decisions that support that personal mission statement every day.
Do you get worried that we're getting soft as a country?
I do, for sure. There's an element of that. And I think as parents, we don't often, we get into that competition game of wanting to plow obstacles out of our children's path at every turn to make it easy so they don't feel pain. But I think it's really kind of letting our kids fail in a controlled environment, letting them fail, letting them face adversity, because that's going to develop the grind. That's going to develop their commitment to things that are hard in life to get them where they want to be and really to toughen them up. So not everything has to offend you, right? Sometimes people say things. It's on you to be offended or not be offended. It's on you to kind of say, here's how I'm going to respond to whatever's going on, and here's how I'm going to get to where I need to go.
Stephen Drum, thanks so much for your service.